Welcome everybody. This is Reflections number 3. Now this is a very special Reflections, and it's not at all commonsensical. When I talk about the title, which is The Logic of Dictatorship, you should sort of say, how is this going to be? It's really important and it's very unusual. Now, we're having, as with all of these reflections, a pre-recorded part followed by a discussion part afterwards. Now, the pre-recorded part I actually wrote when I was, I wrote it a week and a half ago in Africa, in Malindi. I was out on the coast of Kenya at Malindi, and I was checking out the wind surfing that they have out there. I normally do regular surfing, not wind surfing. And wind surfing is sort of different. I mean, you have a kite and it actually can take you up like high. But I normally do normal surfing and also bodyboard surfing, but in Florida mostly. But in Kenya, along the coast, in most places, you can't really do that because the waves hit the reef. So if you're surfing, the surfboard hits the reef and that gets all chewed up. So the type of surfing that works really great in Kenya because of the reef is kite surfing, or anyway, so that's what I was doing. And in between checking out all the kite surfing, I wrote what you're about to see, what you're about to hear. And so what we have here is the formal sort of explanation, the theory part of it, and then we're going to be talking. Now when I come back after the pre-recorded part, we're going to be talking about this book. That's right. This is Star Wars Darth Plagueis. Now, it so turns out, I personally, just my personal opinion, I personally think that the people who write this is sort of within the context of the George Lucas canon of Star Wars, which is the official, real George Lucas view of the Star Wars concept, which is very different from the very recent Disney Star Wars movies, which sort of went in a different direction. And I understand they're trying to get back to the canon. But anyway, I have a sense that many of the people that write about the official George Lucas canon type stuff, or without their really knowing it, were sort of channeling information that was sort of coming in, or remembering it from another life or whatever. But with regard to George Lucas, his Star Wars stuff, the first 6 movies, they were so close to the galactic holocaust that took place. We actually did a project on George Lucas and Star Wars and the envisioning of Star Wars, and found that in fact George Lucas was remembering stuff from his own experiences way back when in the galactic war that took place. And that's where the Star Wars saga came out from. He may not understand that or know that or agree with that or whatever, but that's what we found. Anyway, the Darth Plagueis book, which is a great book, and I really recommend people to buy it and read it. It explains from the Star Wars story the theory of the Sith, why they do what they do. And it's so important because what you're about to see soon is that Farsight is moving in a direction of a unification between what you might call the Jedi mentality and the Sith mentality, because both of them are very dysfunctional in isolation. And we're going to go over some of the dysfunctionality of the Sith mentality, but they have a really interesting good part. They have figured out something that needs to be understood and is correct. And you have to understand the logic behind it in order to understand why it's correct. Now, its implementation in the current Earth prison planet concept is horrific. And in the galactic war or holocaust that took place, it's horrific. However, there is a kernel of truth to it. And the reason that the Jedi are off base, they don't quite get it, is because they don't understand the good element of the Sith thinking. So the Jedi have a good element of their thinking, the Sith have a good element of their thinking, but in isolation they're both dysfunctional. So we have to explain the logic behind what the Sith do. Anyway, we're going to be talking about this after the pre-recorded part. So the pre-recorded part has the theory, and then we're going to be talking about this, and this is going to be tons of fun when we go through this. Okay, it's going to be tons of fun. So stick with me, hang in there. This is Reflections number 3, The Logic of Dictatorship, followed by Darth Plagueis. Okay, so let me get this cranked up and going, all right? We'll start with the video presentation. Hi, everyone. This is Reflections number 3, the third in a series of presentations published in the summer months of July and August 2021, presentations that are designed to help pull together a long series of remote viewing projects done here at Farsight involving extraterrestrials. Now, this reflection focuses on politics as it is practiced by many human political leaders, as well as the controlling extraterrestrial leadership of two primary groups who we like to identify as operators of the old empire, or more specifically, Orion and reptilian groups within that old empire. This is the type of leadership that makes you wonder how in all the universe anyone could be so bad. Well, as you know, Farsight has published a number of remote viewing projects that explore the idea that Earth has long been used as a prison planet within this galaxy, and that the controlling old empire extraterrestrials are still active in locking this planet down, even after death. According to our research, when you die, you just can't go wherever you want. You're recycled here over and over again after being mind-wiped and brainwashed. The controlling extraterrestrials have also long controlled human leadership through a variety of additional means, from direct mental manipulation to more mundane methods such as threats and bribery. They have this planet so locked down it's virtually forbidden for any mainstream politician, scientist, or media outlet to discuss the topic of the extraterrestrials and their UFO spaceships openly and in a serious manner without facing career-busting censorship and ridicule. There are very few exceptions. How often, for example, have you heard of U.S. presidents saying that they know more about the UFO phenomenon than they are willing or capable of talking about? There is a lot that they know that you are not told about, and perhaps they hint about it occasionally out of a sense of guilt. After you watch this presentation, you will hopefully better understand why this happens. The result is that Earth is a psychological prison, but one that is far more effective than any prison made out of cinder blocks and concrete. Now, before I begin, let me emphasize that there are other extraterrestrials who do not think the way I explain in this presentation, and many may want to call these other extraterrestrials the so-called good guys. Now, those other extraterrestrials often think more in the way that I describe in my next Reflections presentation, Reflections number 4. But now, let's dive into how and why the controlling extraterrestrials and their human allies think the way they do. To simplify terminology, let's simply refer to the old empire controlling extraterrestrials that run the Earth as a prison planet as simply old empire operatives. There are a few species involved, but primarily we are talking about extraterrestrials who look very much like Earth humans, plus reptilians and finally greys, who are the short guys with the wraparound eye coverings. Now, in Reflections number 2, the previous reflection, I discussed what is essentially the difference between what we can metaphorically call the Sith mentality and the Jedi mentality, or more directly, a focus on self versus a focus on others. And today I'm going to explain the logic behind the selfish or Sith type thinking. If you really want to know why the Earth is so messed up, this is the presentation that explains most of it. I think you will see that the Sith type of thinking actually makes a lot of sense once you examine it closely. Now, I'm not going to condemn this type of thinking, even though it may at first glance appear that it is the cause of a great deal of suffering. The truth of the matter is, and again metaphorically, that the Jedi way of thinking, total service to others, can also cause a great deal of suffering. So I am just going to explain things, not condemn or praise either approach. The best way to describe the way of thinking of the old empire operatives and their cooperating human leadership, allies knowingly or unknowingly, is with a theoretical approach that Earth social scientists call game theory. To begin, there is the idea of rationality. Here one assumes one of two things, either that all sentient beings are rational in their thinking, or they act as if they are rational. So it does not matter if they actually are rational in their thinking, since minimally their actions can be understood as if they are actually rational, even if they are actually bonkers. Now, in some way or another, their actions make logical sense, and our job is simply to figure out the logic behind what they do and how they think. Now, game theory is based on an understanding of something called utility. And utility is a form of conceptual currency that all desired or undesired things can be boiled down to. That is, if we want something, then that something is worth something to us. Now, the trouble is, how do you compare one thing that you desire with another thing that you also desire if the two things are conceptually very different? For example, you may want the government to be more open on the subject of UFOs, but you may also want a better job and for the wars on the planet to end. How do you compare one thing with another so that you can know which is more important to you? Well, what you do is to translate each issue into how much utility it gets you. And in this way, you can sort of think of utility in terms of how good it would make you feel if you get what you want. Then the question of comparing two very different things is simply figuring out which thing will make you feel the most good if you get it. So these good feelings are measured in the currency of utility, and you simply evaluate which issue has the highest utility, which tells you which issue is more important to you. Utility is a feeling thing, good or bad, good and positive if you want something, or bad and negative if you don't want it. Fundamentally, everyone in existence has one rule in common that totally determines all behavior. All beings want to maximize their utility. They do what they do because everyone wants to feel as best as possible by getting as much as they can that makes them feel good. Now, for this way of thinking, there are no exceptions. You can be a nun or a burglar. It does not matter. Absolutely everyone does what they do regarding all things in an attempt to maximize their own utility. Now, to begin understanding how the old empire operatives think and their witting or unwitting human leadership allies, those guys do not highly value the opinions of the multitudes. There are too many conflicting opinions of what is good or bad. This is because every individual is looking at existence in terms of maximizing their own utility. Everyone wants what makes them feel the best. So if you allow everyone to exercise free will, the result is confusion because so many people want different things. You get chaos as the society collapses into continual fighting as groups form of like-minded people, and then those groups fight it out in an attempt to get what they want. On and on it goes without end. Constant and continual fighting. Also, and importantly, the society never really achieves anything great. There is no higher outcome where everyone feels better about who they are and where they are. The process of continual fighting makes it impossible for any large-scale organized effort to succeed. So it is impossible to achieve anything really great. This is why the old empire operatives buy into the idea that someone has to control things to organize society. And this means that the masses cannot hold on to the idea of free will for everyone, or confusion will be the only and inevitable result. People have to be told what to do such that a large-scale positive outcome that is better for everyone can be obtained. That is, someone at the top must be in charge, and all societies need to be organized in a top-down hierarchical manner in order to do this. Now, the million-dollar question then becomes, who is going to run the show? Now, in some circles, the person at the very top is called a philosopher king, since the person is supposed to have a wise vision that will guide society. Well, the people at the top will be just as rational as everyone else, and they will be trying to maximize their own utilities. Remember, there are no exceptions to this rule. So, who determines who is going to be in charge? Who determines whose vision of society will win? It is simple, actually, at least from the perspective of this way of thinking. The people at the top of society are simply the best people from within that society. They are superior and everyone else is inferior. They are in charge because they are of a higher caliber than everyone else. Now, how does one tell who is of the higher caliber? And that's also simple. The highest caliber people will win the game of ruling everyone else. The winners are the winners simply because they are the best, and it is totally proper for anyone else to follow their lead. The free will of those downstream, so to speak, is simply not important, since those people are inferior to the ones at the top. And if the ones at the top are not the best, then they will be toppled by others who are superior to them. So in the long run, the winners are always the best because they are the ones who won. And if they were not the best, they would not have won. The strongest survive, the superior rule. Now, let's describe politics. How is it that people rise to the top to rule others? This is best described in terms of a game, and this way of thinking is called game theory. You see, everyone has options. Everyone wakes up in the morning and is faced with the option of either doing one thing or another. Now remember, each person acts to maximize their utility, always. So each person has to make choices from the available options. Let's say that you are a store owner and you want to earn as much money as possible today. Earning the most money possible will maximize your utility. Well, you have a competitor down the street, and you have to beat that competitor in order to earn as much money as possible. So you decide to have a sale so that you can attract more customers. The trouble is, if you have a 10% sale, then your competitor might respond with a matching sale, or worse, even a 20% sale, and then you could lose customers. So you need to try to figure out what you think your competitor will do if you have a sale. So you strategize. You say that if you have a 10% sale, then your competitor will respond with having either a 10% or a 20% sale. If you have a 20% sale, your competitor will also have to decide between having a 10% or a 20% sale. So there are 4 possible outcomes, and you have to decide which outcome will be the best for you in terms of attracting the most customers and the most profit. Your choices, a 10% sale or a 20% sale. Your competitor's choices, the same, a 10% sale or a 20% sale. And for each of your 4 possible situations, you will end up with a certain proportion of the customers. And what you want to do is to pick the option that will give you the best possible outcome relative to what happens with your competitor. There are actual rules for determining which option is best for you, but we don't have to get into those details. Just know that you have to make a choice of what to do. And if you get the most customers, you make the most money relative to your competition, and you win the game. Well, this very simple game just lets you understand the basics. The reality is that one day follows another, and each day someone must come out on top given new situations and new events. The old Empire operatives believe that they are superior to everyone else, so they should rule. That is, they believe that their vision of society is the better vision, which in this case is that the integrity of the prison planet has to be maintained. And if people just fall in line with their vision, society will improve, and most people will be better off. But the problem then becomes a daily choice thing, one where they are faced with new options each day in order to remain in charge. It is just like when you are the store owner. You have to beat your competition day after day or you will lose. So the old Empire operatives are faced with the continual problem of making choices that keep you following their plan, such that their vision of the world wins. Now, if they make the same choices each day, every day, then you will figure out how they think, and you will change what you do so that you end up winning. So the old Empire operatives need to mix and match various options at their disposal, constantly keeping you off guard. It is never a one-time thing. It is always a constant and ongoing struggle to keep at the top. So what they are going to do is to vary their choices such that in the long run they win. They can lose from time to time, but with constant repetitions of the game day after day, year after year, their goal is for them to dominate and for you to lose in the long run. The biggest fool is the one who wins once and thinks that the game is over. The old Empire operatives play for the long run, and they can be very patient as they work to wear you down. So, the old Empire operatives are like chess masters on steroids. They make lots of choices, knowing always that it does not matter what happens to you. The only thing that matters is that their vision of the world wins. As long as they continue to win, that is all the proof that is needed to indicate that they are the superior beings and you are the inferior beings. All this boils down to a game of control. The old Empire operatives need to control you. Well, that is how the Earth got set up as a prison in the first place. Nearly everyone on this planet got here because they did something that upset the old Empire forces. And once those forces decided that you were to be sent to prison, they believe that it is their right as superior beings to do whatever is needed in order to stay in control by keeping you in prison. Perhaps you made a mistake on your taxes. Perhaps you insulted someone. Perhaps you were like Socrates and you asked too many questions. Perhaps you were an artist, and all artists are revolutionaries almost by definition, and revolutionaries think in terms of change that can threaten those in control. Perhaps you were an inventor, and your former society didn't like you churning up everything by trying to change how they did things with what was already invented. Think of how the leaders of such tightly controlled societies would have responded to people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, both of whom are examples of technological revolutionaries. In societies where the leaders believe that everything that can be invented has already been invented, such people are a threat. You may have even tried to invent a product that would have made a competitor rich. It does not matter what you did, you upset someone. And that means that the old Empire authorities felt the need to get rid of you so that their continued rule would not be threatened in any large or small way. So here you are. Since it is impossible to kill anyone, the only thing the old Empire operatives can do is to try to keep you here, one way or another. Now remember, they are trying to maximize their utility, so they see keeping you here as their best option. Of course, societies like the old Empire can quickly become decrepit, and decrepit societies really do need a revolution. And according to the rule that the best will always eventually rule, societies like the old Empire will eventually collapse. The trouble is, they can cause a ton of suffering along the way as their authorities do everything in their power to maintain their control for as long as possible. Nothing is off limits. Nothing. The only thing that matters is that those in charge continue to win and continue to stay in charge. All else is secondary. Moreover, it turns out that even decrepit regimes can last a very long time. As those of you who follow Farsight's projects know, the old Empire operatives suffered a major military defeat back in the old Egyptian pyramid days. You can see some of this in our Great Pyramid of Giza project. That forced them to give up overt control over the planet, but it did not get rid of them. They simply went underground to become guerrilla operators of the prison planet. And one of their primary strategies is to make life on Earth so miserable such that humanity gives up the idea of universal equality and surrenders to the rule of centralized human leadership that is controlled either directly or indirectly by old Empire operatives. Well, since the old Empire operatives were attacked in the old Egyptian pyramid days, to operate more in the open today without being attacked again required that the old Empire operatives obtain some still secret agreements between themselves and one or more earthly governments. Agreements that we at Farsight have stated are null and void since they were made in secret, and remain secret. Those agreements cannot be binding on people who have never even seen them. But still, the old Empire operatives used those agreements as a means of establishing a foothold on the planet. Remember, it is like a chess game on steroids. For a while, at least, their strategy of using those fraudulent agreements seems to have worked, since they have overt underground bases again, and they have not been blasted off the planet. Now, the game has shifted to trying to make sure the public does not wake up to their presence and demand that they be kicked off Earth. To do this, the old Empire operatives need to constantly monitor the communications on the planet so that they can influence or control any and all information given to the masses, especially any information relating to the extraterrestrials themselves. For example, in Reflections number 1, E.T. Lies, I discuss how they do this in part by utilizing the channeling community. They have, of course, different strategies for different communities. It is all a game of chess on steroids, and they have had a long time to get good at this. So, to recap, when societies are ruled by leadership that follows the rules of service to self, the leadership needs to trick the society one way or another into accepting their rule, usually by impressing upon society that their leadership is the only thing keeping everything from descending into total chaos. So, disrupting that society in unseen ways is crucial for their efforts to succeed. The leadership is always actually acting in what they think is in the best interest of society. And in terms of Earth, the old Empire operatives think that the galactic society will be better off if the prison planet is maintained. In the absence of strong centralized authority, there will be free will, which leads to chaos and confusion, since free will embraces the idea of everyone individually maximizing their own utility, come what may, which would mean that no one is in control. There is no single vision for society. To establish a vision for society, someone needs to take control, and to accomplish this vision, one needs to break down the old order such that the populace will gladly surrender their claims for equality in exchange for the control by leadership that professes a vision that will lead to an outcome that benefits all. Now, to get to this stage, the society often needs to be pummeled to its knees. Think of Germany before the rise of the Nazis, near total economic collapse combined with what was perceived as national humiliation. At that point, societies will often voluntarily choose radical new leadership that offers to impose order. What such rulers have never been able to understand, however, is that rising to rule can be largely idiosyncratic to events that occur at a particular time and place. For example, militaries often rule countries because there is no other organized groups, not because the militaries are particularly wise. They also fail to recognize that the original vision of all human leadership is eventually replaced by the simple desire to stay in control at all costs. And all the resources of the state are then used to drive the society into submission. That, of course, is fascism. The bottom line with this reflections is that the controlling old empire operatives are guided not by immature desires to control others. Rather, their activities to oppress the human population on Earth is driven by a sophisticated and highly logical way of thinking that accents the idea that the imposition of order is necessary for any society to rise above dangerous chaos. And chaos is the inevitable result of free will thinking because of the way all subjects maximize individual utility in a rational manner. Moreover, the old empire operatives see no downside to physically disrupting any society through any means as long as the result is the population screaming out for salvation by some visionary individual or group. Of course, the old empire operatives see themselves as that visionary group that should rule. It is all part of the strategic game. The seemingly altruistic idea of allowing people to follow their own intuition for individualized expression so as to gain personal growth is completely alien to this way of thinking. From the perspective of the old empire operatives, they are not evil. They are here to save society, since the real threat of evil comes from social chaos that results from free will thinking. Their goal is to prevent that. Interestingly, this type of thinking is why there is such a high proportion of creatives on this planet. Artists, scientists, inventors, writers, musicians, you name it. In general, in our observation as remote viewers at Farsight, extraterrestrial societies tend to be very homogeneous and, in creative terms, sort of boring relative to the norms of Earth. It is clear that this planetary prison population is an amalgamation of creative types who have been rejected from a large collection of extraterrestrial populations. Oddly, this also means that once the Earth's population is freed from its psychologically defined prison confines, it will be a very unique society in our galaxy. There will be no other extraterrestrial population that comes even close in terms of creative brilliance. As odd as this may seem, this very long prison experience will have forged a new collective presence in the galaxy that will have combined talents never before seen in such concentration anywhere else. Now, take this one step further. Remember the rule of governance among those who think in terms of service to self. Those who rule are those who are superior, and those who are superior are determined by the fact that they rule. One can only assume that there is a deep fear among the old empire operatives that those who they oppress and confine on this planet might very well be superior in some definable manner that could threaten the continued rule of the old empire forces. This population is unique. It has been enhanced in its uniqueness by being unnaturally concentrated in terms of creative talent. In all truth, the galaxy does not know what will happen once the Earth's human population is released from these prison confines, and it only stands to logical reason that the old empire operatives know that they are guilty of oppressing this population, and in so doing, creating a population that they now fear. You see, there is a very appropriate old African saying that is applicable to the thinking process of the old empire operatives, especially now. The guilty are afraid. You see, that is the way of the Sith. They always know that the goal of all people is to maximize their utility, which means that there will always be challengers to all leadership. The greatest danger to all Sith masters are their own apprentices. The apprentices eventually try to kill off their masters so that they can rule, so that they can impress their vision of the future of society. So the Siths are always afraid of being replaced. They are always looking over their shoulder, always on the lookout for the next attacker. They repress those whom they fear the most, and they only fear those who might attack them. And since this is a planetary prison population with unique characteristics, it is natural that the old empire operatives would fear this population, possibly more than any other population in the galaxy. That is the ultimate reason why they continue to exert so much energy controlling this planet. That is also the reason why they have invested so much in terms of time, energy, and resources to create genetic hybrids that have blends of human DNA. They reason that their hybrids may become their best defense against a human population that may one day turn against them. It's logical. I hope this presentation has helped explain the logic of their ways. For now, the human mainstream will reject all these ideas as delusional. But the human mainstream are victims of oppression. They cannot see the obvious reality of their situation, even though it is right in front of their noses. But don't you be fooled.